We are halfway through the year, which means we are that much closer to Christmas. And today, I have a special Christmas in July video. Hey there, my name is Yami. I am your Latina next door. Welcome back to Mi Casa, where I share high-end home decor and DIYs on a budget, as well as extreme before and after room transformations. If that's something you enjoy, please make sure to hit like and subscribe so that you too can become part of the familia. For today's video, I decided to create some neutral Christmas decor. Let's get started with the first one. Alright, so for this first DIY, we're going to be using these tomato towers from the garden section at Dollar Tree. We are also going to be using some raffia for this. Now, you can always use the hula skirts at Dollar Tree or get the raffia bags at your local Hobby Lobby. However, I just bought this one online on Amazon, and I'll link it below because it just keeps giving. No matter how much I use of this thing, the roll still looks the same, so I can use it for so many other projects. I'm going to show you 3 different ways to decorate these trees for Christmas. Some are going to be a little bit more complicated than others. Now, this is probably going to be the most complicated. And what you want to do is wrap the raffia around all of the wire. You're going to want to wrap the entire base, and then you're going to want to work your way up all of the individual wires. In order to make sure that it doesn't fall off or come undone, make sure to add a little bit of hot glue here and there as you're wrapping it up. And soon it'll start looking something like this. And like I said, this is going to be a very tedious project, but I promise the end result is going to be absolutely stunning. So after you have wrapped all of your vertical wires, you're going to take your raffia and you're going to go around 3 of the 6 vertical wires like I have right here. It's going to create a triangle. And what you're going to do is you're going to start moving up, leaving a little bit of space in between as you go. And as you make your way up the wires, you're going to add a little bit of hot glue to glue them down to each of the vertical wires so they don't slide down. Now, because you can't put the big spool through, you're going to have to cut different pieces and then glue the ends of them together to continue the raffia all the way up to the top. Then after you make it all the way to the top, you're going to come back down to the bottom, and then you're going to wrap the triangles around the other 3 wires that you did not wrap earlier. So basically you're doing a triangle in the opposite direction. Then once you get to the top, you're just going to wrap the raffia around the very top over and over on itself so that you can get everything covered at the top and not have any wire exposed. The final thing you're going to do is take the raffia and begin wrapping it around the final wire that's spiraling down the tower. And this one is definitely going to take a little bit of strategy because you have to make sure you get around all of the other areas that have already been wrapped and make sure none of that wire is exposed. All right, now that we're done with the first one, this next one's going to be a little bit less complicated. And the first thing you want to do is grab some raffia, several strings, about 3 per braid strand, and you're going to want to braid it into one long braid. Next, you're going to take your raffia and on the flatter, wider side, you're going to apply that onto the outside of the wire, covering the exterior portion of it. This time you're not wrapping it around, you're just placing it directly on top. Next, we're going to take more raffia and we're going to wrap it down the cone in a spiral fashion. At first, I started off wide, and then I took more raffia and began filling in the spaces in between. And I tried my best to keep the spaces in between the spirals as even as possible. The final step is to take the braid that we had created earlier and glue that along the original wire spiral that goes down the tower and cover it up. I also used the braid to cover the bottom part of the tree. The final tree is the simplest. Basically, you're going to start at the very top of the tree with your raffia, and you are going to wrap it on the exterior portion of the wire all the way down, wrapping it even over the spiral, making sure that it's very tight and you're not seeing in between any of the raffia pieces. And as you wrap it downwards, you're going to see the spiral on the outside of the tree form, and it's just going to accentuate that spiral downwards and you'll see it come through. Again, as you work your way down, just make sure everything stays nice and tight, and when you get to the bottom, make sure you wrap the bottom round piece so that you don't see the wire as well. And that is it for these 3 Christmas tree tabletop pieces. So today's Christmas in July video is a collaboration coordinated by my dear friend Shannon over at the Daily DIYer and the Cozy Christmas Cottage. There is an amazing group of talented YouTubers that are all participating, and I will have a link in my description box for the playlist where you can find all of them and everything they created for this collaboration. Christmas brings joy to all of our hearts, and we hope that this brings a little joy to yours. Alright, so after getting you dizzy with all of that wrapping, let's do something a little bit more simple. I found these heart fillers a while ago. I've had these for a couple years now, and I just thought they were a great deal, and I just had to pick them up, but I never did anything with them, and I think now is the time since I'm going for a more neutral look for Christmas. And I only got these for $2, which I thought was a pretty good deal, and I'm just going to turn these into ornaments. All I needed to do was get some ribbon, and it could have been any color, but I wanted to keep it nice and neutral, so I just picked what I had on hand, and I had some thin white ribbon. I cut them down to size, and then I added a little bit of hot glue and just placed it between the little center part of the heart at the top. I would use a pair of scissors to hold the ribbon down while the glue dried, and then I would just tie the ends into a bow so that they can be easily hung. I did this to all 6, and now I have a new set of ornaments for my tree. All right, you guys know I'm a sucker for napkin rings, and I had to try this out. I saw something similar on Pinterest, and I wanted to see if it would work. What you see here is some plaster of Paris, which is 2 parts plaster, 1 part cold water. And I just have it here on the bowl right now, just kind of soaking in, and I'm gonna let that sit for a minute while I get started on my flowers. Now, these are little poinsettias that I had from some leftover bushes from a Dollar Tree. And what I did was take the entire flower apart. After letting the plaster of Paris sit for a little bit, I took a popsicle stick and began to stir it to make it nice and smooth. Then I took one of the flowers and submerged it into the plaster of Paris, making sure I covered all of its surface. I took off any excess of the plaster of Paris, and then I set it to dry. And then I repeated the same thing over with the rest of the flower pieces, making sure that everything was covered and that not too much plaster of Paris remained on the petals after I submerged it. And sometimes I would just wring it off like this to get the excess off, and I actually thought that that worked better. I would smooth it off with my fingers, and then I would place it to dry. Now, this is something that gets quite messy, so if you don't mind getting messy, this is something definitely I think you should try. Now, when I set these to dry, I kind of wanted to raise the petals. I didn't want them to be completely flat because once they dried stiff like this, I wanted them to have a little bit of dimension. Now, as you can see, I did dip the stems into the plaster of Paris, but later on I winded up not using them because the plaster of Paris came off the plastic really easily and wouldn't stay on. Now, while they were still a little wet, I did not show this part, but I did make sure that the holes on the center of the petals were still open. And as you can see here, I have 2 of the petals and the plastic stem without any plaster of Paris on it. And I went ahead, put them together, and with a little bit of hot glue, I made sure to affix the stem onto the flower. Then I cut the excess stem off, added a little bit more hot glue, and adhered the wooden ring onto the bottom for the napkin ring portion. Now, you can buy inexpensive wooden rings at your local Dollar Tree in the Crafter Square. I have not seen them in my store, so I actually had these ordered online, and I bought a pack of various sizes, and I'll link it below as well. And then I continued to do the same to the rest. Now, I didn't have enough of these to make a whole set, so hopefully when they come back out this fall, I'll be able to complete my set. The last step was I took some crystal clear enamel, and the only one I had a glossy finish, so I went ahead and used that, and I just coated them so that I can protect the finish and I wouldn't have any of the plaster fall off or get onto any of my napkins when in use. And that was it for this DIY. This is how they turned out. Okay, so these next ornaments I have been wanting to create for a while, and we're just taking some inexpensive Dollar Tree ornaments that you can get. They're plastic and non-shatterable, and what we're going to do is we're going to make these look old and vintage. And I got this idea from my friend Debbie over at Debbie's Design Diary. She did this a few years ago, and I have been wanting to try it, and I finally decided to do it. So what I'm doing here is I've got a couple of different molds from Iron Orchid Designs, and I am pressing down some air dry clay into the molds to create some beautiful scroll patterns for my ornaments. I wanted them to look like a set. So what I did was I used one pattern from the scrolls and I used 2 pieces per each ornament. Now, while the air dryer was still malleable and not completely dry, I took some wood glue and spread it on the back of each of the little pieces that I had just created. I would put one underneath and then one over the top in opposite directions. And then once it was completely dry, I took some of DIY paint in white swan and painted the entire ornament. Now you're probably going to get a little bit of paint on your fingers. After the whole ornament is painted, I go in with my hair dryer to just speed up the paint drying process. Now once the paint has been completely dried, I go in and I apply clear wax. Now this is the DIY paint clear wax that I use on all my projects. And what this is going to do is it's going to serve as not only a protecting layer for the paint, but I'm going to be adding another level of texture, so I need to have this before I go on to the next step. And while that wax is still tacky, I am going to go in then, oops, I had a little bit too much of the dark decrepit dust. And I'm just going to work the decrepit dust into all of the nooks and crannies. And next I came in with a damp lint-free cloth and I just began to remove some of that decrepit dust. Now I did add a little bit too much from the beginning when I had that spill on it, but this is kind of the look I'm going for here, which is a little bit lighter. And as you can see, it just gives it this beautiful aged look. Now I did end up making another set of ornaments. This time I used these leaves and that is what I put on the ornaments. And this time I ended up putting them on green ornaments, and I'm going to paint the entire ornament, including the leaf, green. And I am using the color Gypsy Green for these ones. It's a color that I have used quite a bit this year for lots of different projects. And this paint, along with the white, as well as the dusts and the waxes, are all available on my website. And as you can see, I came in with the clear wax and sealed all of the paint. And since this is a darker color, I decided to do a light dust, and I came in with the white, doing the same thing that I did with the earlier ornaments and just filling in all of those little crevices on the surface of the ornament. And here you can see the difference between the ornaments. The one on the left only has the paint, and the one on the right has the wax as well as the decrepit dust on top. I repeated the same steps with the rest of the ornaments, and then I took some raffia ribbon and used that to hang them, and here is how they turned out. I hope you're enjoying these DIYs so far. And if you haven't done so already, check me out over on Instagram at the Latina Next Door. If you have an Instagram account as well, I share behind the scenes and a lot of fun reels. So I hope to see you there. For this next DIY, I found these wood curl roses at my local Dollar Tree in the floral section. And once I saw them, I thought that they would make the cutest miniature Christmas trees. Now, this is going to be very simple. All you have to do is stack these on top of each other, making sure that the one on the bottom is larger than the ones on top. And all you need to do is add some hot glue and place the little rose curls on top of each other. And because these are very similar in sizes, I think the most you can really do is a 3-tiered tree or even a smaller 2-tiered one. Now you can use these as ornaments, or for instance, like I did here, I put it in an old candle jar on top of a little bit of sand, and then I added some greenery, and then all I needed to do is put a lid on it. Or you can even put it on a little wood cube and make it look like a little statue. And here is how they turned out. Alright, in this next one, I'm not sure how I feel about this because I'm not sure if I like how it ended up turning out in the end. But you guys know that I love sharing absolutely everything and being upfront with you all, and just sharing that sometimes things just don't always go as planned or as we envisioned. Now, I got this frame at an estate sale. It was the last day and it was the day that they just wanted everything out, so I got it for free. I love the frame, but I wasn't really too fond of the painting, honestly. So I thought I would use it to create some Christmas art. And I had this crazy idea of creating like a 3D Christmas tree and making it look something very old and vintage as well, kind of like my ornaments. So I got some air dry clay and got my molds out and began creating different casts of different shapes. And then I began to arrange all of the different molds that I had created. And then I began to move around all of the different shapes that I had created and try to form that Christmas tree. Once I was happy with my Christmas tree shape, I took some wood glue and began applying it to the back of the little shapes and adhering it onto the frame. After everything was nice and dry and adhered to the frame, I began to paint the inside part white. But then I actually went and painted the frame as well, because I wasn't too fond of the gold shimmer that it had. Then I took some of the dark and decrepit liquid patina and began to apply it on the frame portion. This creates kind of like a faux wood look. And then this is the part where I got a little lost. I first started applying the same green that I used on the ornaments all over the raised portion of the Christmas tree. But I wasn't too fond of how it was turning out, so I ended up adding a little bit of gold throughout just to see if that would add a little bit of shimmer and make it look better. And I didn't like that either because then it made the tree look more yellow than green. So then I went over it with a little bit more white paint to try to subdue the gold, but it didn't work for me. So I ended up painting the Christmas tree white again. And then I proceeded to do the same application of wax and decrepit dust that I did on the ornaments earlier on in the video. And as you can see here, I'm just using a lint-free cloth that's a little damp, and I'm removing as much of that dust as I can to lighten that inside space of the frame and only highlight like the crevices and all of the nooks and crannies of the actual, I guess, 3D, sculpture of the Christmas tree. Now the finish came out really beautiful, but I'm just not 100% sold on it. I don't know, I feel like it's missing something, or maybe it's too dark. I'm not sure. Let me know in the comments below what you guys think. If I should change it up, leave it as is, or do something different. I'd love to know, because this is how this one turned out. Well, that's it for this year's Christmas in July video. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please make sure to hit like and let me know in the comments below which one of these DIYs was your favorite. Don't forget to check out the playlist in my description box so you can check out even more fun inspiration. I hope you're doing well, and I will see you back very soon with another home decor and DIY video. In the meantime, please make sure to check out these videos right here for more inspiration, and I will see you all soon. Until then, adios!